The spark was I was traveling 45 minutes to an hour, depending on Houston traffic. Becky knows all about Houston traffic. So I was driving 45 minutes into work and 45 minutes on the way home. And I discovered this thing called podcast, right? Since I was already kind of dealing with managing my own money, I'm not even sure where I found it. I guess after Dave Ramsey's podcast, I just happened to see the others in the sidebar of, hey, you might also like enjoying listening to this. So I listened to Choose FI podcast, the Mad Fientist, Bigger Pockets, like some of these others. And what I realized just by driving to work, if you think about it, I was driving an hour and a half a day. I was listening to 3 hours of podcasts a day at 2 times speed. I did that for about a year. So I listened to about 3 hours of personal finance podcasts for a whole year straight. And I said, hey, I really love this stuff. So we think about the spectrum of delegators, who say, just do this for me. And then validators who say, I want to do everything myself, but I want somebody to just say, yeah, you're doing a good job, or no, here's some things you can change. So that's very binary. That's a binary way for us to think about it. But there's really a spectrum of products and services that can be obtained with working with a financial professional for anybody on that spectrum, from 100% delegator to 100% DIYer. And one phrase I use, people talk about DIY, it means do it yourself. And a phrase that I say is, just because you're a do-it-yourselfer doesn't mean you have to do it alone. I guess let's actually start on the side that I'm most passionate about, which is the validators. The ones who say, I believe I have what I call the time, the temperament, and talent to manage my own trades, to click the button on Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, wherever you have your money. But I need advice on all the other stuff. When do I claim Social Security? Am I on track? How much should I be saving? How much can I save? I need help with choosing the right employee benefits, my group benefits at work. I need help reviewing my tax return, making sure it was done correctly. I think biggest mistake for me was really not asking myself fully, especially as a financial advisor, was not asking those questions of who do I want to serve, right? And how do I want to serve? I think even if you're not a financial advisor, a lot of you probably aren't, but my biggest financial mistake, again, was letting the money drive my decisions rather than my life and my family drive those decisions. So my biggest financial mistakes have been chasing the optimization of this financial opportunity, like doing the backdoor Roth IRA, right? Or maxing out my 401k, right? Without backing up and being like, oh, wait, I just maxed out my 401k before I'm changing careers, and I would have really valued that flexibility and liquidity within my investments, right? So I think the biggest financial mistake that I make, and most DIY investors listening to this make, is that they over-optimize. They chase the 20% and miss the 80%.
Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Becky, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your hosts. We're here to help you with your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting from.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with Becky Heptig, my co-host, and today we're here with Cody Garrett. He is widely known in the Financial Independence Network, and I'm going to let Becky do our introduction so you can learn a little bit more about him.
All right, here we go. So Cody Garrett is an advice-only financial planner, passionate about helping families refine their path to financial independence as DIY investors. As a certified financial planner professional, he specializes in comprehensive financial plan development, topic research, and personalized financial education. Cody believes that truly comprehensive financial advice can provide the clarity and confidence necessary for families to implement their own well-informed decisions. Cody's financial education insights have been featured in articles by Forbes, Barron's, Yahoo Finance, Fox Business, MarketWatch, Morningstar, Business Insider, Morning Brew, and CNBC. Whew. Okay, now that's the brochure description of Cody. I haven't known Cody personally for very long, but Bill and I have been in the same groups with Cody online for several years. I know he's passionate about financial education and setting you up for financial success. He's been a member of the FI community for several years and is quite active in several different forums online. In fact, you've probably noticed Cody commenting on questions in the awesome engagement that we're having on our Catching Up to FI Facebook group. So we are excited to talk to Cody today and have him help clarify some topics that, quite frankly, have confused me. So Cody Garrett, welcome to Catching Up to FI.
Thank you so much, Bill and Becky. Becky and Bill, this is an awesome collaboration. I'm excited to educate your listeners. And again, we're all learning together, including me. I always say that when you teach, you learn twice. So I'm excited to teach and learn today.
So let's jump in. You weren't always a financial planner. You had a total career before that. Take us through where you started and how the heck did you find financial planning?
So I started at Herman Hospital in Houston. No, I won't go that far back. So I know
that hospital.
Yeah, Herman Hospital in Houston, Texas. I was born 15 minutes after the fireworks came off or shut off. July 5th. Yeah, exactly. Right after the 4th of July.
Cody and I are fellow native Houstonians, even though I don't live in Texas anymore. So this has been kind of fun to talk about Houston stuff.
Yeah, so I grew up in Houston, Texas with a family, really a family of NASA engineers. My grandpa worked at NASA for over 40 years and have lots of cool astronaut stuff in my office, in my closet. And I grew up really, the only big interest that was consistent throughout my childhood was music. So I started playing piano when I was 5. And I did that all the way through the end of high school. And at the end of high school, people were like, what are you going to do in college? And I said, what's the only thing I'm good at? I guess at this point is music. So I got a degree in music. I got a degree in music theory from the University of Houston. And then I went to the Berklee College of Music to study contemporary piano performance. So kind of knowing both sides, the classical part of music and also the contemporary part. Then I spent 9 or 10 years as a professional musician, as a music director and arranger. I've played Broadway musicals. I've kind of done a little bit of everything. And people ask, what kind of music did you play? And I say, whichever one paid the bills. So if somebody offered me a gig to play banjo, I'd say yes, and then figure out how the heck do I play banjo. So I learned along the way as I was kind of forced to become independent, right? Those 9 to 10 years of experience as a professional musician, I didn't realize until now have given me great perspective on how to be self-employed, how to be independent financially. So I went from music to money. So in 2018, I did a career change from being a professional musician on Wednesday night to being a financial planner on Thursday morning. So it's been a crazy transition from music to money. I just told Bill 5 years ago, I didn't know what an IRA was. So I know a lot of listeners here, you feel behind, literally catching up to FI. And you're like, what the heck is an IRA? And you feel like you're late to the game. So I was 30 years old, didn't know what an IRA was. And now I'm on the Catching Up to FI podcast. So you can see how much changes just by having drive, intention, and really just trying to learn as much as possible.
If you're now on the Catch Up to FI podcast, you've come a long way.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about some of your money experience too. I mean, it sounds like you didn't know what an IRA was. Were you any good with money as a musician?
So good with money is a funny phrase. I guess I was good with cash flow management and debt management. But going back, I worked as a church musician, and a lot of that, something that's taught in a lot of churches is Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. So actually at church, when I was working at church for 9 years, I saw this DVD course that they were doing. I took the DVDs home and I watched Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, and I learned the baby steps. And I had kind of realized at that point, I had been following the baby steps. I had an emergency fund. I paid off my high interest debt, paid off my student loan debt within about a year and a half. But at that point, I was making money, right? I was spending part of that money on the way home from the gig, right? I'd play the gig on the way home. I'd pick up some food to eat and then come home with whatever was left. I had a very low cost of living. So it's important for listeners to know, I grew up in Houston, Texas, which is a large city, but I grew up outside of it. For example, just to give you an example of low cost of living, we bought a 4-bedroom, 2,000 square foot house, 10,000 square foot lot, my wife and I, house. We paid $150,000 for it. So just keep in mind that in terms of being good with money, one part of being good with money is I happened to grow up in a low cost of living environment where even at that point, while I was working as a musician full time, my apartment cost $500 a month, and that included all utilities. So I didn't spend very much. I made about $75,000 a year as a professional musician. And I guess we can talk about too. I actually ended up taking a pay cut to become a financial planner. I went in the opposite direction. So really, Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University was a big part. And just being forced, you're effectively forced to become quote unquote good with money when your only source of income is self-employment as a professional musician. So I just thankfully just learned how to do it by adulting quickly after college. But it wasn't until literally, 5 years ago, at age 30, where I realized, hey, good, you paid off your debt. There's two phrases I ask people, which is, do you spend less than you make, or do you make more than you spend? They're kind of the same question in a way, but I was making more than I spent effectively. I wasn't spending very much, but I wasn't intentional about having a cash flow plan. And I definitely wasn't putting any money toward retirement until about age 30.
In a way, you got it right with cash flow planning, but you didn't necessarily get it right with retirement savings. And the IRA popped into mind at 30. Do you find there's any similarities between music arrangement and financial planning?
Oh, that's such a good question. Yes, ultimately, what I found out, I thought that financial planning would be such a different thing. Like I thought it would be like, okay, like a huge flip the switch. I'm a professional musician and boom, like you're doing something completely different. But financial planning to me, in a very kind of humorous way, is really orchestrating somebody's financial life. So as a musician, if you don't know, there's a difference between a composer and an arranger, right? A composer is usually somebody who's kind of creating music from nothing, right? They're just creating something from scratch. Whereas an arranger, the composer says, hey, I've created something. They send it to an arranger and an orchestrator, say, hey, make this better, or take this piano piece I wrote and reorchestrate it, but for a full piece, 100-piece orchestra. So as a professional musician, I was actually an arranger, not a composer. So my whole job as a musician was to take something that somebody else created and make it better for that person. Now, as a financial planner, I don't create somebody's financial circumstance from scratch. They come to me with their financial circumstance, and I help them make it better for them. So I found that there's so much, not just in terms of the data, notes versus numbers and things like that, not just in terms of the spreadsheets and the data, but also just the collaboration, the communication, having to think, having to listen while you speak is just like having to listen to the other musicians in the band as you perform. So there's a lot of, I would say there's even more soft skills that translate than technical skills. But the transition wasn't very difficult, I found. But I learned that kind of after the fact of changing careers.
But why, from music to financial planning, what was the spark?
So the spark was actually, I think, the Choose FI podcast. So actually the spark, I'll back up a little. The spark was the commute to work. The spark was, I was traveling 45 minutes to an hour, depending on Houston traffic. Becky knows all about Houston traffic. So I was driving 45 minutes into work and 45 minutes on the way home. And I discovered this thing called podcast, right? Since I was already kind of dealing with managing my own money, I'm not even sure where I found it. I guess after Dave Ramsey's podcast, I just happened to see the others in the sidebar of, hey, you might also like enjoying listening to this. So I listened to Choose FI podcast, the Mad Fientist, Bigger Pockets, like some of these others. And what I realized just by driving to work, if you think about it, I was driving an hour and a half a day. I was listening to 3 hours of podcasts a day at 2 times speed. I did that for about a year. So I listened to about 3 hours of personal finance podcasts for a whole year straight. And I said, hey, I really love this stuff. The biggest spark from that is I was talking with my mom one day, right, checking in on me. And she said, hey, what are you up to? I said, hey, I've just been really enjoying learning more about personal finance. And she said, hey, if you really want to learn a lot about personal finance, you should talk to your godfather, which is kind of humorous in its own way. You should talk with your godfather, Joe. She said, I think he works in that space. So I reached out to Joe. Joe is a financial planner. He's a certified financial planner. He owns his own investment management firm. And he says, hey, if you really want to learn a lot about money, like enroll in a CFP education program at Rice University. And even if you don't end up becoming a financial planner, the amount of information you're going to learn in that course will make you much better at managing your own money. So I enrolled in that course as a professional musician. I enrolled in the CFP education program. Just 2 classes in, I was like, this is what I want to do. And the way I describe financial planning is I want to help families create a bridge between their comprehensive financial ecosystem and their unique values and desired outcomes. So that's really what financial planning is to me. And I like within 2 classes in, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people just get even more personal with their personal finance.
That's amazing, Cody. So when you started your CFP program, you still weren't starting it with the intention of this is what I'm going to do for a living.
Right. I was just like, I just want to learn. I want to drink out of the fire hose and learn as much as I can. And then this is what I see within the FI community, including your own Facebook group, is as soon as you learn something like this, if you're a just naturally generous person and transparent person, you say, wow, that's so valuable. Who can I help? Who can I share this with? As I mentioned before, when you teach, you learn twice. And the best way to learn is to teach. So as I was learning the CFP education material, I was teaching it to classmates, my wife, I was teaching it to people within the Facebook groups. And what's funny about it is by just transparently sharing personal finance education with those Facebook groups without ever mentioning I was an advisor, without ever saying, hey, set up a free consultation or anything like that, just giving without expecting anything in return, which is really the definition of kindness. That actually ended up, that was actually the rocket ship to my success as a financial planner and even launching my own firm just like two years after that.
That seems to be a theme that I hear over and over again, is that if you give of your own wisdom and time and to help others, that it always comes back to you manyfold sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get into a topic I really want to talk about, because I've been a DIY investor. There's probably a lot of our audience that are or would like to be DIY investors. But when you do that, you always kind of look at your spreadsheet and go, wow, I wish I had another set of eyes to just look at this and make sure I'm not just heading for the ditch somewhere. But to me, the nomenclature and the titles in that space are so confusing. You hear financial planner, financial advisor, CFP, retirement planner. Can you just try to clear some of that stuff up for us? Because I know I would love to hear that. And I think our audience would too.
There's a spectrum of financial advisors. I mean, it seems to start with salesmen and end up with kind, generous people that really get it. Can you take us through that spectrum so that people understand what they're looking for?
Yeah, and you don't have to feel bad because the industry is having just as hard of a time figuring that out. So just give yourself some grace and compassion that like we're trying to figure it out too. So you're going to see all sorts of names. Thankfully, you're going to feel better about this after I mention this, which you're going to see the word financial or wealth or retirement. And then you're going to see some other word like advisor, planner, strategist, consultant, specialist, associate. You see all these, the fancier the term, by the way, probably the worse the advisor, right? In terms of the conflicts of interest involved, right? If you see somebody they've got five names to describe what they do, that's probably 5 things they're probably going to try to sell you at some point. So just know that the labels, what we call ourselves, it means absolutely nothing from a regulatory standpoint. So there's no regulation currently around the usage of any of these titles within the financial services industry. And there's also no standardization of education, experience, or licensing. Somebody can have 20 years of experience, call themselves a financial advisor. Somebody can just create a TikTok account and start talking about money and call themselves a financial advisor. And they're seen the same from a consumer standpoint. And it's very hard to differentiate who actually knows their stuff, who can actually work with me, right? And make sure that they're providing advice in my best interest. We'll talk a little bit more about that fiduciary standard. And ultimately, how do I know that this person is the right person for me and just is the right person in general, and just making sure that I'm not handing over my money or getting advice from somebody who's just as bad as getting advice from my uncle at the Thanksgiving dinner. It's complicated. Just know that you're not alone, and that anytime you see a title, just ignore it completely. So we'll talk a little bit more about, okay, then what? Then what do you do after you know that that's absolutely meaningless and what people call themselves?
Right. So there are folks that don't want to think about this, and they literally want someone else to just take care of everything. I mean, that's the way I am with things around the house. I have a plumber coming today. I'm like, I don't want to think about that. You just fix it. And then there's folks that want to do all of it themselves. So, I mean, where do we start?
Let's talk about that. I think we think very binary, right, about this initially, which is there's delegators which are people that say the phrase, just do this for me. And then there's validators, which is I have my master spreadsheet. I'm in the Choose FI groups. I'm in the Catching Up to Fi. Like I'm in all the Facebook groups. They've made their master spreadsheet, but they say, just like you mentioned, Becky, I'd love somebody to come in and just say, am I doing this? Did I miss something? And that's actually why I called my whole brand Measure Twice. I want somebody to help me measure twice before I cut once on my retirement decision or whatever that is. So we think about the spectrum of delegators, who say, just do this for me. And then validators who say, I want to do everything myself, but I want somebody to just say, yeah, you're doing a good job, or no, here's some things you can change. So that's very binary. That's a binary way for us to think about it. But there's really a spectrum of products and services that can be obtained with working with a financial professional for anybody on that spectrum, from 100% delegator to 100% DIYer. And one phrase I use, people talk about DIY, it means do it yourself. And a phrase that I say is, just because you're a do-it-yourselfer doesn't mean you have to do it alone. I guess let's actually start on the side I'm most passionate about, which is the validators, the ones who say, I believe I have what I call the time, the temperament, and talent to manage my own trades, to click the button on Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, wherever you have your money. But I need advice on all the other stuff. When do I claim Social Security? Am I on track? How much should I be saving? How much can I save? I need help with choosing the right employee benefits, my group benefits at work. I need help reviewing my tax return, making sure it was done correctly. So there are dozens of financial areas that have nothing to do with clicking that button to choose the right ETF or mutual fund. But yet, when we think about a financial advisor, we initially think that their job is to choose stocks and bonds, right? And to manage our investments for us. And most of the industry, by the way, will not provide any financial advice to a client without first managing their money. So guess what that says to the validator? Nope, we can't serve you. Or if we work with you, you've got to pay us a lot of money to do the things that a lot of the things that you could do by yourself. So the validator, the DIY investor, says, I want to continue managing my money, but how do I get help with all the other stuff? And the solution, thankfully, there's a label. Again, we talk about labels being useless. There is a label that we'll talk about the websites to find the right people, but there's a label called advice only. If you think about it this way, let's say that, Becky, do you have any siblings?
No. Sorry.
How about that? Well, Becky, do you have any friends? How about that? Do you have any friends?
Yes. Yes.
So name like a first name of one of your friends for us.
Robin.
Okay. So let's say Robin comes to you, Becky, and she says, Hey, I'm trying to manage my investments over here. Could you give me some advice on how to manage my money? She does not make the assumption that you're going to go do it for her. She said, hey, can you just give me some advice? Which means, can you give me some personalized guidance? And again, like from a generic term advice, it means, could you please help me determine what to do? But with the assumption that she's going to do that. So Robin's going to implement what you advise her to do. So advice only, that's a label for financial planners who provide comprehensive financial, including investment advice, but they don't manage any client investments and they don't sell any insurance products. All they do is get paid for their advice, right? In the very general sense of, hey, could you give me some advice? So that advice for validators, for the DIY investor, there's 3 ways to be provided that service, which is hourly, project-based, or ongoing. Traditionally, if you're working as a delegator and somebody's managing your investments for you, that's going to be an ongoing relationship. And most commonly, you're going to be paying about 1% AUM, which means 1% assets under management fee, which means that every year, usually paid quarterly, 1% of your account values that are managed by that advisor, that's the fee that they're going to get paid. So they're typically not actually paid for the advice that they give you. They're only paid based on how much money is in those accounts that they're managing the trades for. So what I love about advice-only financial planning is you don't pay for how much money you have or how much income you have, right? You pay for the relationship. You effectively pay for personalized education on what to do, how to do it. Most importantly, why are you doing that? Why are you making that decision based on your comprehensive financial ecosystem, your values and desired outcomes? So we can talk about, I guess, where would you like to go here? When we talk about hourly, project-based, ongoing, financial planning. What follow-up questions do you have for me?
What space do you operate in?
Sure. So I own an advice-only financial planning firm. I serve DIY investors on the path to early retirement within 5 years. And early retirement for me is before age 60. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that 59 and a half, that 10% penalty that everybody worries about. So I work with families on the path to early retirement within 5 years. I only provide project-based financial planning. So that means I provide a comprehensive financial planning engagement. It's limited to just 3 months. So it's a 3-month, 3-meeting process. It's cost $6,400. After that 3-month engagement, they are no longer a client and I'm no longer their advisor. So formally, we only work with 3 months together. I provide comprehensive advice on typically 25 to 30 topic areas. For example, choosing the right stocks and bonds, or the ETFs typically would be just one topic area out of those 25 to 30. So they pay me a flat fee, half up front, half at the end. I give them comprehensive advice and they move on to either implement that themselves or implement with my help, typically during the 3rd month. So I only offer project-based planning. And then for people who want either hourly, kind of as needed hourly advice, or ongoing monthly, more like retainer subscription type of advice, I just refer those out freely to other financial planners.
It seems like that enables the DIYer to budget for this. I mean, you
Right.
don't know where you're going to end up hourly. If you have a project-based management fee, you go, I'm going to get everything for this. I like that model because it's kind of like having a fixed cost of building a house and the contract that way, where as opposed to, we'll just see where we end up based on what your needs are and we'll guesstimate what it's going to cost. But then there's the change orders and those come up. Do you find that there are some folks that have complicated needs where you're not getting paid commensurate to your input? And then there are others that don't have as many needs, but they're paying more for the services than they really need?
So I've specifically designed my business model. Again, every service model is different. I specifically designed mine that every client pays the same fee for the same service and process. So regardless of complexity, I think there's a funny thing about complexity, right? So someone might think a married couple is more complex than an individual, right? But what if that married couple is 2 W-2 employees with no rental properties, no self-employment, but yet the individual client, right? They've got 5 rentals, they own 3 businesses, they just inherited $5 million from their parents, right? The complexity is very subjective, right? So I think the only thing we can do is simplify and say, every family pays the same, every client pays the same fee for the same service and process. And just ensuring on my side that I spend the right amount, like that amount of time. I don't charge hourly, but just like you said, Bill, if let's say you hire a plumber, right, to fix your toilet, right? You can either pay them hourly and they're incentivized to like take their sweet time. If they're project-based, on the flip side, their conflict might be to rush the service, fix it as fast as possible, get out of there because they're getting paid the same amount no matter what. From my case of really, also legally having to work in the best interest of a client and also communicate to regulators about how I do my services, I make sure that I bring every client through that entire comprehensive process, don't cut corners along the way. Again, every service model is different, every advisor is different, but at the same time, advisors, again, when you're looking at different financial planners, different advisors, you can ask these questions about how do you keep track of the time you spend working with clients? How do you ensure that you're not overcharging people with not a lot of complexity, or vice versa, or undercharging people who are very complex? So I think that's a good question to ask when you're interviewing a financial planner, is saying, how did you come up with your fee? And how do you ensure that your fee is fair to every client that hires you?
It seems like transparency is key. And if you feel like the transparency equals trust, are there other questions, the top 5 to 10 questions that everybody should ask of somebody they're looking to employ as a financial advisor?
Sure. I think we can all narrow it down to 3, which is even easier. It's like a 3-point sermon, just down here in the South. We always have 3-point sermons. So the 3-point sermon is there's 3 questions that every financial advisor should ask before launching their business, and every person should ask the advisor before hiring them. Question number 1 is, who do you serve? So that means, hey, if somebody were to go interview me, they say, who do you typically serve? I say, I serve typically married couples with kids They're on the path to early retirement within 5 years. One of the just again, kind of the ideal, the avatar client of who I serve. If I mushed all the clients together into one client, right? They typically have $2.5 million investable on average. They have 1 to 2 rental properties, right? So you can see here, if the advisor, before saying anything to the advisor about your circumstance, if you ask the financial advisor or the planner, who do you serve? When they tell you who they serve, say, does that sound like me? Right? So if I went to a financial planner and said, who do you serve? They say, oh, we serve single females with equity compensation and rental real estate. I would say, okay, am I female? No. Do I have equity compensation? No. I own my own business and I hardly pay myself from the business. And then do I have rental properties? No. And I don't plan to. So I think once you understand the ideal client avatar of that advisor, and by the way, if an advisor says we serve all sorts of people, right? I would say you can't be everything to everybody. If a financial planner says they serve everybody, that probably means that they're not going to have the specialized expertise to serve your specific needs. So if you need help with equity compensation, and that's not one of their specialties, you'd probably be better off hiring somebody who, when you ask that question to, they say, we specialize in equity compensation. So the first question is, who do you serve? Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
No, I was just going to say, I'm an emergency medicine physician. It sounds a lot like the evolution of medicine, where back in the day you had the quacks and there was no regulation. And as time went on, there was a lot of regulation and specialties evolved, from even general practitioner to your gastroenterologist, your cardiologist. And you may start general, but find out your needs are more specific and migrate to somebody like you once you've honed and refined your needs. And then you know what you're getting because they're an MD with a specialty. And we don't have that in the financial advisor spectrum. I think it's evolving that way, but we got a long way to go to get there. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's go through the rest of your questions.
Yeah, to add to that, that's a great example, great extended metaphor or analogy of hiring a physician is if you go see a doctor, they might actually be a specialist in the thing that you need help with, but if they recognize that you have another need, they're going to refer you to another specialist. In my space, I can say I'm a generalist in terms of I'm a financial planner. I'm educated through the CFP and all those things. I'm a generalist in terms of my broad education, but I'm a specialist in early retirement distribution strategies and Roth conversions, right? And some of these unique topics that to serve our specific community. So if you're interviewing a financial advisor, I think it's important to understand that they generally have an understanding that can come from sometimes seeing those designations like the CFP or CHFC or some of those letters after their names. But it's also important to understand their specialties. And also that's a great follow-up question to ask them, hey, if you find that if there's a specific topic that you're not an expert in, do you have a professional network of people that you could refer me to, freely refer me to? The second question, after you understand who they serve, is how do you serve? So that could mean, what does their process look like? Do they offer hourly, project-based, or ongoing financial planning? What is their communication preference? For example, I don't have a phone in my business. I only communicate through email and video calls. So if you want to work with a financial advisor, you can just text anytime you want. Hey, just got an opportunity to buy some investment property. What do you think? It would be really important that you ask that advisor before you start working with them, what is your preferred communication style? So ask them who they serve, how do they serve? Also, in terms of how do they serve, also ask which financial planning topic areas do you cover in your financial planning practice? So I typically cover 25 to 30 areas, right? That includes, again, I call it everything in your life with a number on it. If you ask that question to an advisor and they say, oh, we specialize in traditional retirement planning, but they don't say anything about taxes, that's another thing you could ask is, do you review client tax returns? If your advisor says, no, we do not review client tax returns, it's not that they don't file tax returns, but if they're not going to ask, actually, I'll just back up a little bit. One of the questions that comes with how do you serve as a financial planner is, which financial documents will you want to review to create the comprehensive financial plan? If they don't mention tax returns, I would hesitate to work with a financial advisor, financial planner who's not going to provide tax advice, because as nearly every movement of money involves a tax consequence or specific exclusion. So to just say, we don't give tax advice, we don't touch taxes, is to pretty much ignore one of the biggest rocks in the financial plan. And the last question to ask, you've asked, who do you serve? How do you serve? The last question to ask is, this is a question to ask yourself, which is, what's the most appropriate way for me to pay for the service this financial planner provides? So and I think a lot of financial advisors, they build their practice starting with the question of how do I get paid? And then they say, who am I going to serve and how am I going to serve effectively to be able to pay that fee? Whereas if you know who you serve and how you serve, it's really easy to determine how to get compensated for that. So since I provide comprehensive financial planning with a 3-month, 3-meeting engagement, it doesn't make sense for me to charge an AUM fee. First of all, I'm not managing any investments, right? And it also doesn't make sense for me to charge based on how much money they have, because I'm specifically charging for the work I do, not for how much money they manage themselves. Since I'm going to do a 3-month, 3-meeting process, I'm going to charge for the process. I'm not going to charge hourly, right? Because we've already defined the scope of the engagement. So once you know who they serve, how they serve, and what's the most appropriate way for me to pay for that service they provide, then you'll have a really good understanding of whether or not they check the boxes of aligning with your specific circumstance and really just saying, hey, is this the right service for me? The financial planning industry is still slowly moving away, but I think it'll speed up, which is, it used to try to work with the best, used to work with the person who lived closest to you. You used to find an advisor based on your zip code, right? Now, given the virtual world we live in, you can work with the best financial planner for your specific circumstance, rather than just working with the closest person down the street, right? And typically, too, if you're going to work with somebody down the street, it's probably going to be your nearest Edward Jones office or Fidelity or another brokerage office. These aren't bad advisors necessarily, but most of those bigger offices, they're not required to act in your best interest as a fiduciary at all times. So I think it's just really important that you do your due diligence, just like they have to do, to make sure that the advisor you hire is exactly the right fit for what you're looking for before you pay them any dollars or cents.
What questions do you ask of clients to make sure you're the right fit?
That is a great question. This can also go both ways, which is I always ask about their family before I ask about their money. So a lot of times you're hiring financial advisors, you're focused on the money. But what I've realized in serving hundreds of DIY investors and even at my last firm, I served a lot of traditional retirees with AUM, the AUM service model, is that if the advisor asks about your money before they ask about your family, what does that tell you about what they care about? Right? Mm-hmm. So money, I mean, you hear this phrase, money is just a tool. I don't think it's just a tool. I think it's more than just a tool. But I will say that financial planning is effectively understanding your family, your life, your desired outcomes, your unique values, effectively as an individual or as a family. And then only then do you plug your money into that, right? So if I were working with a client, I would ask about their family. Again, when I ask about their family, they might say, we have our son, Tommy, our son, Tommy, he has special needs, right? Be like, ding, 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 right? Do I have a specialty in special needs planning, right? Do you think that specialty is important enough for me to possibly refer them to another financial advisor who specializes in that area, right? Or if they say, we're a mixed family, right? We're both on our 3rd marriage, right? It's really important for me to understand the complexities of multi-generational planning and just that complexity that comes with not just the money, but the relationships. So I think it's really important that I learn about their family and then only then say, okay, and then ask them effectively, hey, like what encouraged you to reach out to a financial planner? And then only then will I learn about their financial circumstance that they want help with. So once I understand about their money, once I understand their family, I understand about what they would like help with their money, only then can I determine if they're the right fit to work with me.
So if you're starting cold, you don't know where to go. Sure. Are there resources online that help you find people like yourself?
Yes. So to find somebody like me who doesn't manage any client investments, it's not just some clients I manage money for, some I don't. It's just I don't manage any client investments. So there's no possible way I'm going to try to convert you from being a validator to a delegator. I would tell you to go to adviceonlynetwork.com. This is kind of like a find an advisor tool, adviceonlynetwork.com. Nobody pays to be on the website, but everybody on that website has been verified. All their regulatory brochures have been verified on their form. It's called the Form ADV, this regulatory brochure that Every advisor on this website, they do not sell any insurance products. They're not paid for any sale of insurance or investments. And they also don't manage any client investments. So they manage zero money under management, which means the only service they provide is advice only financial planning, that personalized education we've been talking about. If you are someone who says, I would love advice, I would love to pay a flat fee, like I want to know exactly how much I'm paying before I hire this advisor. Because you see that with a percentage, again, like there's fluctuations in how much money is in your account. And if you inherit 1 million, it goes into the account, that could boost your annual fee by $10,000. If you want to pay a flat fee, but you would prefer for a financial advisor to help to manage your investments for you, I would tell you to go to flatfeeadvisors.org, which just like adviceonlynetwork.com, flatfeeadvisors.org it's a free website. Nobody pays to play, but everybody's been verified that they provide comprehensive financial planning and investment management, but for a flat fee, exactly how much you're paying before you hire the advisor. And that fee could be, $10,000 a year paid, split up quarterly. It could be $250 a month. There's a spectrum of how you could pay for that, but it's just really nice to know in terms of transparency, this is exactly what I'm getting, and this is exactly how much I'm paying for it. So adviceonlynetwork.com and then flatfeeadvisors.org.
Cody, if I were a delegator rather than a DIY person, then is that what you would suggest? What does that person do?
Sure. So the flat fee advisors, if you hire somebody to manage your investments, the really important thing that they do is they provide financial planning and investment management. On the investment management side, what this really means is that they manage the trades. They probably have they're going to effectively create your portfolio. And by the way here, this doesn't necessarily mean an advisor is going to try to beat the market, right? A lot of people advertise like we beat the market or we try to. Most of the financial advisors that you could hire through flatfeeadvisors.org, they probably use the same portfolios that we use within the FI community. Low cost passive index funds, whether ETFs or mutual funds. Just because you have somebody managing your investments for you doesn't mean it has to be complex. And a lot of financial advisors, they create what we call complexity for the sake of job security. So Rick Ferry kind of talks about this, which is a lot of financial advisors, they create very complex portfolios for clients who delegate their investment management to them in a way to show them, hey, you could not possibly do this yourself, right? They almost feel like they have to prove that they're worth the fee by making the investments very complex, where in reality, usually you're going to be better off with simplicity, maybe just like a couple funds in your portfolio at the most, right? So even if you delegate to a financial advisor, me personally, I'd prefer, even if I were delegating my investment management for a flat fee, I would want those investments to be very simple. I want to be able to understand that, yes, I could do this on my own if I had the time, temperament, and talent to make my own trades. Bill, you mentioned there's a lot of emergency room physicians who they have the talent, right? They have the talent and the temperament to manage their own investments, but they're just like, I just don't even want to think about that. I've got too much going on. Yeah, if you're working with a financial advisor, know that they can still understand the philosophies of financial independence, low-cost passive investing, and even manage your money the same way you could as a DIY investor.
So give us an example. We've talked to Jael Collins. We've talked to Paul Merriman. We've seen a spectrum of investment allocations, and nothing fits all people. But give us a little spectrum, say, of 2 or 3 portfolios that you would use for most investors. I mean, do you follow the simple path to wealth? Are you that simple, or do you do a few other things too? Because our audience wants to know, can I augment my returns with a couple little simple steps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that simple path to wealth, and by the way, maybe this can be like a show note, but I actually did a Twitter thread, my review of the Simple Path to Wealth book as a financial planner. And I agree with pretty much all of it, which is the simple path to wealth is getting the 80% right? For example, who cares if you choose the best large cap growth fund if you're not contributing to your account? We can all kind of agree that, especially in your first 20 years of being an investor, your disciplined contributions matter way more than which investments you choose. With that said, it does matter which investments you choose. The simple path to wealth, definitely that's the 80%. I would say that I'm a proponent of the simple path. With the addition, but I do the 20%, which is like the optimization, usually on the tax side, because I think taxes is something where you can really, at the end of the day, it's after tax wealth that matters, right? So we'll talk a little bit about conversions if we have time today. I know we talk a lot about this fun stuff. But in terms of optimization, we all understand that the 80% is effectively getting asset allocation. So your balance between equity and fixed income, also known as stocks and bonds, that's the biggest driver of returns, of course, outside of your discipline to invest. Let's say that you're in an 80-20 portfolio, 80% stock, 20% fixed income, that if your 80% is all US, all VTSAX and chill, like simple path to wealth style, just broad US equity, just one fund, versus breaking up that fund into 11 sectors, right? 11 sectors just for large US, and then having mid cap and small cap value. I know there's a lot of small cap value fans, right? In terms of, especially over long term, right? Expecting that risk return trade-off. But at the end of the day, all US equity is 90% plus positively correlated to each other. So I think that would be the case for the simple path to wealth is all US equity is effectively going in the same direction at pretty much the same speed, right? They all rise together or they all fall together. In terms of asset allocation on the other side, I'm not a big fan of adding tons of, owning large growth, large blend, large value, breaking it up into what they call the Humpty Dumpty portfolio, which is like you throw the index fund on the ground, you pick it back up and then piece together all the separate allocations. I think that creates a lot of unnecessary noise for a lot of clients. Some clients, it does make sense to create a little bit more opportunities for tax loss harvesting by having a few more different funds. You can manipulate some tax strategies there. But in terms of the flip side of fixed income, I think that's where you should focus on really traditionally negatively correlated assets to equity, which traditionally really the only publicly traded thing that we see is US Treasuries, whether that's bills, notes, bonds. You can buy Treasuries in all sorts of forms, but effectively I'm looking for growth with my equity and I'm looking for liquidity. I'm looking for stability with my fixed income and diversification, of course, with that negative correlation to equities typically during harsh environments. So I would say that almost every client I work with, at the most, we have, in terms of being simple, a 3-fund portfolio, which is US equity. I do believe in international equity because of the different sector exposures. Because you see, for example, in the US equity, we've got a huge tilt toward technology, right? 25% of the S&P is technology stocks, at least at this point, as we're talking through this. Whereas international stocks, you have a lot more tilt toward natural resources, right? And things like financials. So I do believe there's additional diversification international. I do a 70-30 split between US and international. Again, it's not magic. It's just the way that I've come out with my models. But US equity, international equity, and then fixed income, I typically go toward US Treasuries. And I'm not against the total bond, which, by the way, total bond market index is a hybrid between primarily US Treasuries and investment grade corporate bonds. So again, simple. Even though I know a lot about financial planning and investments, I still keep it simple. My own portfolio is, I probably will never have more than 3 funds in my total portfolio.
So do you use intermediate treasuries as your bond allocation? William Bernstein, in a recent podcast I listened to, said the equity or the fixed income premium with corporates added to treasuries is 0.9%. And the downside risk is it's not worth the fixed income premium. And he advocates treasuries as well. This is not something we typically hear, obviously. Everybody follows a simple path to wealth. And I actually agree with the treasury approach. You don't play with your fixed income adding corporates.
So yeah, like all put together, right? They can be, diversification isn't just, you don't just look at them individually, you look at them combined. But yes, I do agree with you that corporate bonds are still positively correlated to the stock market, right? If you ask a retiree, hey, what's the point of owning bonds? They always say, hey, when the stock market goes up, right? Or when the stock market falls, I don't want my bonds going in the same direction, which again, last year it happened for a few different reasons, right? Especially interest rate risk and things like that. But yeah, exactly what you said, Bill, like corporate bonds, You might get additional income. You should get paid for taking that risk, right? You should accept higher levels of income for that level of risk. But at the same time, usually those corporate bonds aren't actually giving you what you want the bonds to give you, which is stability and diversification. So I agree that let your growth. I don't chase income, by the way. I take a total return approach. I'm not a dividend chaser, or I don't really care about yield. I care about growth and I care about stability, kind of like a barbell approach. So just like you said, equities, diversified equities, US and international equities, and then treasuries to create. And by the way, the stability, it doesn't just have to come from like short duration. You talk about intermediate treasuries. You don't have to get short term necessarily for that stability. You can also use treasury ladders. You can ladder out treasury bonds. Again, depending on how much noise you want, you can either buy like an intermediate treasury like fund, or you can actually buy individual treasuries and create your own ladders. It creates a little bit more, it reduces that interest rate risk because you're just what they call asset liability matching of, hey, I know I need money at this point in time. So I'm just going to create a ladder. I'm going to create that rung of that ladder to pay me, make sure I have that money ready for me, regardless of what happens with interest rates. Like I know how much I'm getting paid and I know how much will mature. Yeah, a lot of retirees want that additional optimization for taxes, but also for just having comfort and knowing that their money is going to be there when they need it in retirement. Equities, US, international, and then treasury bonds laddered if needed for the emotional, to hedge the emotional, that part of the equation.
If we go back to talking about a financial plan for one of your clients or anyone that would hire someone, can you just run us through the basics of a good financial plan? What are the elements of a financial plan?
You've got the 25 points. I'm not sure
Yeah.
this is all of them.
Well,
but
I can say it pretty quick. Yeah, I can say them pretty quick. I'll put them into little modules. How about that?
That works.
I'm actually pulling up my data gathering checklist. By the way, we can put a link to this. I have a data gathering checklist, which is a list of all the financial documents I review for clients, and I can share that PDF with you. So, biggest things, right? We want to understand. I always say we have to understand where we are before determining where to go and how to get there. So before we start figuring out looking at our investments and think about the future, we have to understand our income and outflows. Like where's our money coming from and where's our money going currently, right? So we need to understand income and expenses. That also plays into liabilities. We need to understand debt. We can talk certainly on this call or another call more about debt and all like misconceptions about debt repayment. But income and expenses, including debt payments, looking at the total portfolio of investments as a whole, but also going down into the nitty-gritty of looking at every holding and every account, understanding. If you think about this like baseball, there's all these sports analogies in finances, which is, let's say you have a baseball team. In terms of your baseball team is your investment portfolio, right? You don't want every member of the baseball team standing on first base with a baseball bat in their hand. And what this means is if we have multiple investments, if we have multiple players on the field, we want to make sure that they're playing different roles, that they're playing the same game in alignment with our unique desired outcomes and our comprehensive financial situation. But we want to make sure that if we own multiple things, we want them doing multiple things. Just like if you go into the grocery store and you're not going to buy 5 different bananas of the same brand, right? So there are many times I look at investments, even of the DIY investor, and they own 5 different things doing all the same thing. So looking at a comprehensive and going down into the gritty details of the investments, which includes real estate investments. Looking at risk management, so all insurance, all forms, whether life, disability, health, long-term care, homeowners, auto, umbrella liability coverage, all of it. Employee benefits, which also includes some group insurance, understanding your tax withholding from your paycheck at work. If you're self-employed, making sure that you're getting the right deductions and things like that as a self-employed individual. And then lastly, tax returns, right? I have to look at federal and state tax returns to understand where has our money gone in the past and how have we been reporting our finances correctly. And then lastly is our estate documents, your beneficiary designations, your wills, powers of attorney, trust. So again, there's really like 7 maybe core areas, but you really have to dig in if you really want comprehensive advice on your personal finances.
I might add a couple of things there. Asset protection being one. Looking at that, it's important to me as a physician, should be important to everybody. And then one thing we might have forgotten is a giving plan. So adding that into and some people start with the giving plan, and migrate down the rest of it.
Mm.
For example, we use donor advised funds in our giving plan, and we find that makes it very easy to do. And we can talk about those at another episode. But yeah, that's a really good comprehensive approach to what people should expect, way beyond just the asset allocation and the investment portfolio, which is what they expect going in. There's just so much more to it, starting with your goals, looking at your life plan. And I think the best financial planners aren't about the financial plan first and foremost. They're really about what are your goals, what's your life plan, and let's design your finances to reach those goals.
And I agree that, I mean, just like you said, the financial plan is a bridge. If you visualize a bridge between two islands, one island, yes, is your comprehensive financial situation. But the other island are those unique values and desired outcomes. Like that's your goals, your objectives, the things you care about. Like Bill, you said charitable giving. On the financial side, that is primarily going to come from an evaluation of their taxable brokerage accounts, like donor advised funds, like giving appreciated securities, qualified charitable distributions, QCDs. That's very technical, but I wouldn't have been able to build that bridge if I had not understood your family's desire to give to charity, whether your energy, your resources, your time, energy, and resources. Again, that comes back to I have to understand your family before we talk about your money. So that's a great example.
And Cody, with those, I keep coming back to if you're a delegator. And maybe one of the reasons I think about that is right now I'm a DIYer, but as I age, I'm 67, my husband's 68. As we age, we have come to realize there's going to be a day when I don't want to think about this anymore, or I don't have the capacity to think about this anymore. So those elements of a financial plan, do those apply if you're trying to hire someone and you want them to and you want to delegate to them?
Yes. So if you were to delegate to a financial advisor, you should get everything that the advice-only financial planner does, which is the comprehensive analysis of all those areas we talked about. It's just that you're adding on the delegation of investment management. It's not one or the other. So if you're delegating, it's really important that you're not giving up the other. Like the industry, the financial services industry has very much been around like charging you for the ice cream sundae. If you think about buying an ice cream sundae, this is like a fun analogy, right? So the financial services industry, what they've done in the past is that they give you an ice cream sundae with a cherry on top, right? But they sell you the cherry on top, right? They give you the ice cream sundae for free, and then they charge you for and they overcharge you for the cherry, effectively. By the way, the analogy here is that the ice cream sundae is your financial planning, which is understanding what to do with the money. And then your cherry on top is the investment management. So if you're don't pay, like you should never just pay for the cherry without getting the ice cream sundae, right?
I think that's the way a lot of us feel like it looks like we're just getting the cherry. If we take our money to someone, they are going to manage it with the AUM fee, and sometimes they don't even pay attention to the rest of this.
And I think that really goes back to, I mean, I know it's very difficult to find the right advisor. There's just, and I mean, thankfully it's changing. I think I agree. I would say, I'm sure some people would blast me on this, but I still think that about 90% of financial advisors are doing what you're talking about, where they move your money over, they put it into a model portfolio, they might send you a birthday card, they might have one meeting a year with you to show you the performance of the investments. But talking about your family is like, oh yeah, by the way, we went on vacation last week. Oh, by the way, like it should be, by the way, investments, not by the way, our family. So I think it's really important that from the very beginning, that financial advisor should really care about you and what you want to do in life, and then say, and of course, have the expertise to help you plug the money into that. By the way, Becky, one thing you mentioned there, it's really important that some people will say that I'm a DIY investor now, but maybe not later. Or, hey, I really manage the money now. If something were to happen to me, I don't know if my spouse could be successful with how I set it up, right? So I also think that, let's say you aren't ready to even make the decision between, I don't know if I'm a delegator or a validator. I just don't know how much is involved yet. You can hire an advice-only financial planner to help you determine if you have the time, the temperament, and the talent to manage it yourself. I work with people, by the way, who aren't going to hire me ongoing. They wanted to hire me just to say, as an insurance policy, effectively say, if something happens to me, I want my husband or I want my wife, my surviving spouse, to be able to know somebody that they can reach out to. That we're creating almost like a part of our estate plan, that if something happens to me, my surviving spouse reaches out to Cody and gets help. And we want to create a trusting relationship before that happens. And think about it. How much does that help them sleep? The quote unquote, the financial spouse can really sleep well at night, knowing if something happens to them, their surviving spouse won't be taken advantage of by the industry. That their surviving spouse will have a trusted expert that they can reach out to, by the way, that can help them find the right person to delegate the investment management to moving forward.
That's exactly what my wife and I do. She's sort of the big picture person. I'm the finance person, and I do worry about her. And we have in our emergency binder this person's name and contact information so that there can be a transition and peace of mind for her as well as sleep factor for me. There is one specific thing we wanted to touch on before we wrap up, because we get a lot of questions about Roth versus traditional, and especially about Roth conversion ladders. And I have a specific interest in that. We don't want to make a deep dive into Roth, but maybe you can make just a specific comment to what are the advantages of a Roth conversion ladder and how do you create it?
Beginning with an end in mind, I think it's really important that before determining how to invest, like choosing between traditional and Roth, we talk about pre-tax versus after-tax contributions. We should always begin with an end in mind, which is if I'm contributing to traditional, if I'm like taking advantage of that tax benefit this year, what is my plan to distribute? What is my plan going to look like to distribute that income in retirement, including early retirement? So I think that's just a really big thing to mention here is that when you choose between traditional and retirement, or when you choose whether to do Roth conversions or not, you need to begin with an end in mind, think about the long term. So effectively Roth conversions are about maximizing after-tax wealth. Starting off just quickly, I won't spend too much time here. I mean, we could do a whole episode just on this. In terms of choosing between traditional and Roth, the biggest misconception here is that when you're contributing to a traditional retirement account, either deducting the contribution or it's excluded from income going in, you're saving taxes at your highest marginal tax rate, right? That could be 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, 37%, right? So you're reducing your taxes at the highest, your highest marginal tax rate in that year. Whereas think about when you're taking money out of a retirement account, most retirees, especially early retirees, actually, their only source of retirement income before Social Security will come from their retirement portfolio. Most people will not retire with a pension moving forward. Some do. They're lucky. They're the lucky ones, right? And hopefully it's inflation adjusted, right? But the ones who are not retiring with a pension, every dollar in retirement before Social Security starts will come from their portfolio. How are those dollars taxed from that traditional account in retirement? It's actually not like each dollar is taxed at a marginal rate, but it's not all taxed at the highest marginal rate. A part of it's actually taxed effectively at 0, which is their standard deduction, then a portion at 10%, a portion at 12%, a portion at 22%, right? So you can see here that for an early retiree who doesn't expect substantial income from other places outside of their portfolio, they're most likely going to benefit from making traditional pre-tax contributions and then saving at marginal tax rates and distributing that income closer to the average effective tax rate. Just a quick example on that, certainly we can go deeper here. Let's be provocative here. Somebody within the 12% marginal tax bracket, you consider that a pretty low tax rate, right? 12%. A married couple filing jointly, they go into the 12% bracket once their AGI is $49,000, $49,701, right? So once they have AGI over around $50,000, they go into the 12% marginal tax bracket. If you're distributing income in early retirement only from your retirement accounts, and this is just taking it out of your IRA at that point, you'd have to distribute $154,000 out of that account before you hit an effective 12% tax bracket. To back up a little bit, what that means is that person who's making $50,000 a year while working, what are the chances they're going to be distributing $155,000 in retirement? It's very low, especially all at ordinary income tax rates. So what this really means is that, to boil this down into one thing, is not all, but most people who plan to retire early, who won't have big pensions, lots of real estate income and things like that, they're going to be better off contributing to traditional and then in early retirement, setting up a Roth conversion ladder. So any questions about that before I touch on the ladder?
Cody, could you give our audience a quick explanation of what you mean by a marginal tax bracket?
Sure. So your tax rate is based on, if you look at your tax return, there's a line, taxable income. And that taxable income includes both ordinary income from like wages, things like that, taxable interest income, but it also includes like capital gains, income that's exposed to capital gain tax treatment. So that's your capital gains from qualified dividends, long-term capital gains. Those are taxed separately than your ordinary income. Your ordinary income is taxed at marginal tax rates. So those tax rates right now are 10%, 12%, 22, 24, 32, 35, and 37. So they're kind of like little shelves, but it is like the bucket. You're talking about pouring water into buckets. It's not a shelf. It's not, for example, it's not that all your income is taxable at 12 or 22%. It's that a portion is taxable at 10%. And then the next portion is 12. And you keep filling up these buckets. So marginal is just, it's effectively what is the highest tax rate that your last dollar earned is being taxed at. Effective tax rate is actually the average of all of those. For example, somebody who has, so you might have somebody who's in the 32% tax bracket marginally, but they might have an effective tax rate of, let's say, I'm just throwing this out, don't see the numbers in front of me. Let's say their effective tax rate is 15%. So if you average it all, if you divide their taxes owed into their AGI or their taxable income, that's the effective rate. It's a division equation for effective, whereas what's your tax rate at the last dollar earned in the current year, that's your marginal tax rate.
So if somebody says they're in the 30 whatever percent tax bracket, it's not all being taxed at that rate. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and most of it's actually not. And most of it's going to be taxed at the much lower brackets.
Okay.
And as far as the Roth conversion, you do that when your income drops, essentially in the time after you retire. How do you pay for it? Is it with your after-tax dollars? Do you pay for it? Just give us a concept of this as to how do you pay the taxes? From what bucket do you pay the taxes in order to get your dollars into that never taxed again growth and exit from the account?
That's a really important question, especially for early retirees. So let's assume for a minute that you're pre-59 and a half when you retire early, or not even retire early when you start doing any like Roth conversions. If you're younger than 59 and a half, we know that a conversion, since it's going directly from account to account, from a pre-tax account to a Roth account, it's not being exposed to tax. It's not being exposed to the early withdrawal penalty, right? But it's really important if before 59 and a half, you want to make sure that you do not withhold any taxes from the conversion itself, right? Because any amount that's withheld from the conversion itself before 59 and a half will be exposed to not just the taxes, of course, but also the 10% additional tax, which we often call the tax penalty. So you'd pay a 10% early withdrawal penalty if you withhold taxes from a Roth conversion before age 59 and a half. So what that means is, okay, if you're not withholding from the conversion itself, where does that money come from? It comes from after-tax savings and taxable brokerage accounts. So that's end in mind, which means, okay, before I retire early, I need to make sure I have some after-tax, I have money in my after-tax brokerage account. And Bill, you talk about the Roth conversion ladder. Each taxable Roth conversion before age 59 and a half has its own 5-year holding period before the amount you converted can be withdrawn from the Roth IRA without paying the 10% penalty. You already paid the taxes on the amount converted, but you'd have a 10% penalty if you take that money out before 5 years, before 59 and a half. Really convoluted, but effectively that means if you're doing a Roth conversion ladder in early retirement, it means not only do you need typically 5 years of after-tax savings to cover your lifestyle expenses, but you also need 5 years of savings to pay for the taxes on those Roth conversions. This is the big part people miss is they say, I have 5 years of expenses saved up, but then they start doing the conversions. They're like, oh, wait, I forgot that I have to pay for the conversions from my after-tax money too to avoid the 10% penalty. So you need to do the Roth conversion ladder effectively. You need 5 years of after-tax savings to cover your living expenses. You probably want a cushion because your assumed expenses probably won't be the same as the reality of your expenses. It could go up or down, but you also need to make sure that you have the money ready to pay the taxes on those conversions when you do them. And by the way, I would say that Roth conversion ladders are not my priority for early retirement. My priority is actually to use maybe a hybrid, but most likely use what's called substantially equal periodic payments. Some people call it SEPP 72T, which is effectively, you can take regular recurring payments from your pre-tax accounts, your qualified retirement accounts, without penalty, as long as it continues for at least 5 years or age 59 and a half, but whichever is longer. So if you start these substantial equal periodic payments at age 50, you have to continue them all the way until 59 and a half. So I think it's really important you understand there are different ways to take money out and avoid the 10% penalty. And the Roth conversion ladder is just one of those ways that you can avoid that.
So 72T payments are taxed. Is that correct?
Correct.
There's
That's
just
correct.
no penalty.
Correct.
Okay.
This is some complicated stuff, but I wanted to get some tangible stuff in there. It was sort of selfish with the Roth conversion ladder because it's something I've had to learn. We're wrapping up today. We've covered a lot of ground, and you, I think, have offered to be our financial advisor correspondent. I'm not. I'm hopeful that we'll bring you back to focus on some more individual topics. You're a very generous person with your time, and I think our audience has achieved significant value here on multiple topics. We wanted to end with a few questions just because we're all human. Can you let us know, and we learn from mistakes, can you let us know what your biggest financial mistake was?
So I think a lot of us listening, and me included, you might think your biggest financial mistake, I even asked myself this question before, which is, was my biggest financial mistake being too late to the game, right? Not knowing the stuff earlier. And I think it's better to, first of all, thinking about the past is usually regret and depression. Thinking about the future is usually anxiety, right? The fear of future uncertainty. I think biggest mistake for me was really not asking myself fully, especially as a financial advisor, was not asking those questions of who do I want to serve, right? And how do I want to serve? I think even if you're not a financial advisor, a lot of you probably aren't, but my biggest financial mistake, again, was letting the money drive my decisions rather than my life and my family drive those decisions. Mm-hmm. So my biggest financial mistakes have been chasing the optimization of this financial opportunity, like doing the backdoor Roth IRA, right? Or maxing out my 401k, right? Without backing up and being like, oh, wait, I just maxed out my 401k before I'm changing careers. And I would have really valued that flexibility and liquidity within my investments, right? So I think the biggest financial mistake that I make, and most DIY investors listening to this make, is that they over-optimize. They chase the 20% and miss the 80%. They find out about something really cool. Like last year, everybody was obsessed with I bonds, right? Treasury. They're like, ooh, everybody loves I bonds. People are obsessed with Treasury bonds right now. They're obsessed with high yield savings accounts. They love the mega backdoor Roth, and they love the backdoor Roth IRAs. They love the donor advised funds, and we love complexity. We love optimizing our finances and making the master spreadsheet, adding columns and adding tabs to our spreadsheet. Where in reality, we need to ask ourselves, which kind of life do I want this money to serve? And then only then figure out what to do with the money. So again, I think Ramit Sethi talks about designing your rich life. I think it's really important to avoid this mistake. This means having conversations with your family about what do we want our life to look like literally write on paper, visualize what do we want our life to look like this year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And then once you've designed that, say, how can we plug our money? How can we plug our financial situation into this future vision of a life? And I would say, by the way, another mistake that we make is assuming that all the financial decisions that we make are permanent. It's really important to understand that most of the financial decisions that we make can be changed. Just because we do a Roth conversion this year doesn't mean we have to do it every year for the rest of our life, right? Just because we max out our Roth IRA and our 401k does not mean we have to do that every year. So be a little bit more compassionate and have some grace. So the biggest mistake we have is not just only over optimizing, but we also make the mistake of not having compassion for ourselves when we say, oh, that was such a stupid thing I did, right? So the biggest mistakes are probably more behavioral than quantitative or fit within the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I think that's really good advice that applies to our late starter audience. And in regards to that, we're about late starters. We're about helping people get started, start earlier, recover from past mistakes, and look forward to the future, realizing that they can do it. We're doing it. Becky's done it. What specific tips would you have for our late starter audience that gives them encouragement?
So I think the biggest thing for late starters, I mean, it's literally the phrase late starters. Like it makes you acknowledge that you're doing something late, right? And the word late, when's the last time you thought about late in a positive light, right? There's late fees, right? Back in the day, you better not return that Blockbuster video too late, right? Or pay your bills late. I think a lot of us, late starter comes from a place of being hard on ourselves, but it also means that we're comparing ourselves to others. We hear that phrase all the time. Everybody talks about Benjamin Franklin saying, was it Benjamin Franklin, right? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? Yes, you might be a late starter in terms of catching up financially to what you want your future life to look like and the ability to meet that lifestyle with your money. But the specific tips I have is to go into first of all, continue having conversations within this community. I think we're a very generous, transparent, compassionate, right, and passionate community. But specific tips I have is to dive into the community, be willing to learn, but also as you learn about how other people are doing it, don't focus on how other people are doing it, but focus on the concept of what they're doing and saying, does that make sense for my specific circumstance? And Becky, I know we had a little brief call before this, and it reminds me a little bit about, imagine, Becky, if I asked you, hey, where should I go out to eat for lunch today? And you say, oh, you should go to In-N-Out Burger. And I'm like, there's not an In-N-Out Burger within 4 hours of me, right? The specific tip I have for everybody is realize the difference between advice and education, which is when you ask for financial advice, understand that their advice to you is only going to be based on their limited knowledge of who you are. And most likely they're going to give advice. They're going to be giving you advice as if they're talking to themselves, not talking to you. So the specific tip I have is become educated, but don't act upon somebody else's advice if they don't understand your comprehensive financial situation and your unique values and desired outcomes in full detail, which is, by the way, why you'd possibly hire an advice-only financial planner. The last thing I want to say on that is I'm not accepting any new clients for financial planning. So I know some people might be like, oh, I want to work with Cody, but I want to say that I'm not accepting clients, and I'm referring any prospective client that comes to me, I'm referring them to that adviceonlynetwork.com. Again, free referrals. So I just want to say, if you are a late starter and you need one-on-one help, start there. And I'm glad to help within the community as much as I can.
You have other businesses actually that could help our audience. Your planning side is only one of the businesses you run, and you're very generous with your knowledge. Can you tell us about what else you do to help this community?
Yeah, so as I built out my financial planning practice, a lot of other advisors said, I want to learn how you do it, Cody. Show us, how do you create a financial plan? Like, how do you communicate? How do you communicate with the families you serve? How do you find people to work with? How do you work with them? How do you create the financial plan? I turned my entire financial planning process into not only a 7-hour video course, but financial planning community. So measuretwiceplanners.com is where I share my entire financial planning practice. Other members of the community also share how they serve clients within the financial planning community, including what I call niche expert presentations. So we have experts talking about how they use bond ladders, how they use mega backdoor Roth. And we have Sean Mullaney, by the way, who is a guest on your podcast. Sean Mullaney is a member of Measure Twice Planners, and he shared a presentation on the solo 401k. And he also shared a presentation on how backdoor Roths work. So we have over 25 hours of educational video lessons. We have live events every 2 weeks. We actually look at real financial documents as a community. So this Measure Twice Planners is a community really created for financial planners to learn more and provide more value to the families they serve in the industry. But it's also open. It's also open to the public. You're welcome to join if you want to go really deep and kind of learn how the professionals do it. We'll have no stupid questions. We welcome any questions in that community. The other, I think, Bill, what you were alluding to is I also have something called Measure Twice Money. This started off as an educational blog for DIY investors on the path to financial independence, whether early or late or however you define that, right? So comprehensive financial education without any sales. There's never a sale of a product of a service. Just here's everything I know in blog form. But by the end of this year, I think this will probably come out later in the year in 2023. I'm going to create that same community that I did for Measure Twice Planners for Measure Twice Money. So it'll be a community and also probably 10 hours at least of educational video content sharing with DIY investors how to create their own comprehensive plan as a family, whether or not you hire a financial advisor to help you.
Cody, how would someone join up with your Measure Twice Planners?
So if you go to measuretwiceplanners.com, you can actually sign up for a free preview membership, which gives you 2 free video lessons per module. You can get an idea of what it's like and watch some of the videos and download some of the planning tools. Like I have like life insurance calculators, like early retirement calculators, mortgage calculators, things like that. So you can do a free preview at measuretwiceplanners.com, or you can sign up for the full membership, which currently, as if we're talking right now, is $549 a year. And also a portion of that goes toward funding needs-based scholarships. So just measuretwiceplanners.com has everything you need to learn more and even get a free preview membership.
You're an incredibly generous person, and you're incredibly generous with your time today. We appreciate your being here. We want to thank you immensely for all the knowledge you provided our audience. We are very fortunate to have luminaries in the field like yourself that are out to help our average Joes. People like Becky, people like me. The numbers may be different, but the challenges are the same. The path is often the same. And we try and reach topics on mindset, money, and talk to experts. You've hit it out of the park on all 3 categories. So thanks again for being with us here on Catching Up to Fi.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. I look forward to being your next on the field. I'll be out there for you.
Nice.
All right. We look forward to hearing from you again soon, Cody. Thanks again. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to Fi. We would appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review so that our message can reach others.
We are not lawyers, financial advisors, accountants, or tax experts. Please consult your own professional advisors before making any important decisions. Our content is for entertainment and education purposes only.
We'll see you next time on Catching Up to Fi.